Welcome back. Education is evolving, and the demands on school leaders and educators are greater than ever. If you have kids who've experienced the last 4 years and you already understand. But how do you support students when traditional methods don't always apply? I want you to meet today my special guest, Diana Williams, a seasoned leader in special education who is empowering charter school educators to transform how they deliver special education programming, ensuring that all students can succeed academically and socially. In 2019, Diana co founded an elementary charter school in Brooklyn, New York, establishing a special education department committed to responding to the academic and socio-emotional needs of the whole child through something that I absolutely love, a multi-tiered systems of support and trauma-informed care. We're going to talk a little bit about ACEs, right? Since then, she's leveraged her experience and expertise to provide targeted support to charter schools seeking to improve their special education programming, impact, and student outcomes. Her SPEDucated Leadership Framework provides school systems with the systems, strategic support, and leadership development needed to better serve today's students. So today's conversation, my friends, will provide actionable strategies and a fresh perspective on building a truly inclusive educational environment. Welcome to Impact Innovators with Felicia Ford, where we dive into the strategies that empower changemaker brands to leave a lasting legacy. Think of this podcast as your audio playbook for meaningful action. What's possible when thought leaders, disruptors, and pioneers align to share their journeys? I'm Felicia Ford, your host, bringing together the brightest minds and the most groundbreaking ideas to help you drive change, navigate through the sticky stuff, and elevate your brand. Whether you're tackling funding hurdles, looking for growth strategies, or seeking the perfect balance between profit and purpose, we've got you covered. Stay tuned and be a part of a movement that's setting new benchmarks in how we think about progress, community, and doing. Let's innovate, impact, and inspire. Diana, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here with you.
Glad to have you. I say this often. People who listen to the show probably know or may even count how many times I say I'm excited, but I really am interested in having this conversation with you because education is super important to me. I am a lifelong learner. I have a ton of degrees on my wall. I am an aunt who gives books away, right? Like I champion reading over everything else, but I've also, and I'm sure others have also seen how behaviors and other factors have come into play. But your work, it didn't just evolve just because of what we've seen in the last 4 years. It's something that has needed attention from the very beginning, right? So tell us, for people who aren't, you know, aware of what it means to receive special education, talk to us a little bit first about what this even means and why it's important.
Definitely. So when thinking about special education, it is a group or I guess a program of services and supports that an individual might receive in order to help give them access and be successful in the academic setting. So typically, in order for a student to qualify for special education, they have to fall within one of the 13 disability classifications. Some of them we're familiar with, such as like autism, specific learning disabilities, speech and language impairment. But there's also ones that are classifications that people aren't too familiar with, like deaf and blind, or there's another one, emotional dysregulation. And these are just different categories. So once a student is determined eligible, they might receive an academic program depending on where they're performing academically. That might look like them being mandated to receive a 2-teacher classroom setting with a special education teacher and a general education teacher. It might look like them receiving pull-out or push-in services only with a special education teacher. So all students that have IEPs are not necessarily students that are performing below grade level.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends. There's some students that might just have related services, such as speech therapy, because they are working on their expressive and receptive language skills, or they might have occupational therapy or physical therapy. So that's kind of special education really, really quick.
Mm-hmm.
We also think about testing accommodations, extended time, things like that, that also just help kids be a little bit more successful within the school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a mandated kind of protection to ensure that they get these services.
Right. And before we go into talking about your framework and what you do with educators and the advocacy work that you're doing, I know from my perspective of sitting at the table with truancy, right? I've seen tons of kids come to the table where we're, determining what their next steps are going to be, where they have an IEP or a 504 and no one's following it, or they haven't had those meetings. And sometimes parents simply aren't informed about what that looks like. And I know it may shift, depending on which school district you're in, but I'm sure there's some blanket like rules that they should be aware of. So what might a parent expect if their child has a 504 or IEP, or they suspect they might need one? What could they do in that case?
So I love that you brought this up. I think this is what really brought me into this kind of realm within within education, special education specifically, and why I feel passionately about it, and why I feel passionate about being the Black woman sitting at the table and engaging with families that look like me. I've previously worked at organizations where, for lack of a better word, they're pressuring parents to sign consent in order for their students to be referred. And then later on, we're having conversations with parents referring to their special education programs, and parents are confused. They're like, I didn't sign that. I didn't put them in special ed.
Right.
Right. And it comes from, in general, in our communities, there's often this cultural barrier where when we think special education, we think short bus, we think a classroom in the basement that's dark and nobody thinks about it. Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it's amazing that over the past few years, a lot of schools have moved away from that, right? In many schools, you go into a classroom, you can't tell who has an IEP and who doesn't.
Right.
And so, one of the things that have always been really, really important for me to parents is enforcing and making sure that they understand that it's all based upon their consent. So I tell them that even if you give consent on day one and 10 days later you decide actually you don't want to go forward with the process anymore, that's okay. You can revoke consent. And
Hmm.
I feel like oftentimes schools are not always forthcoming with this information, that it's like a once you sign, it just takes off. And that's not the case.
Hmm.
I think the second thing for parents is recognizing that the IEP process, the annual meetings, is a collaborative process. And so at the start of every meeting, they should always be asking you, what is your experience or what are your concerns about your student? What are the things that your students love to do or what are they interested in? And these things are important because, especially when kids are struggling academically or behaviorally,
Hmm.
sometimes we have to find the silver lining in what makes them excited and how to keep them invested.
Right.
And that parent input is so, so important. And I think sometimes parents defer to schools, but no one knows their kids better than their parents.
Right.
And even if you don't know the technical language or, you can't speak largely, you do have an experience of know what it's like to get your kid to get dressed and get to bed every night. Is it a struggle? Is it a hassle? You understand how it feels when you're doing homework with them and you're like, y'all are both like busting your heads together because you're just like, I can't even help them and they are struggling.
Right.
So I think when thinking about parents and special education, I think about the importance of understanding your rights,
Hmm.
understanding that if they're scheduling a meeting, they need to give you advance notice. And if you cannot make it, they need to reschedule it. They don't have it without you. And that parents have a voice. And I think that that's the big, if we can just start there, I think a lot of our problems can be
Yeah.
lessened. I mean, they're not going to go away, but I
Yeah.
think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you offering that information to empower parents and helping them to see that this is a collaborative effort, number one. Number two, that they have a say in this process. And number three, even if they have questions, they really should speak up and ask. Yeah.
100%. And you don't have to wait until the annual meeting. Like
Right.
whenever you have a question, ask it.
Yeah.
Ask for progress reports on how they're doing in speech therapy. So that way, then you can double down on it at home and we can really work collaboratively to get the students to where they need to be.
Right. And you mentioned something else, Diana, that about the culture and the myths of what special education looks like. And I think there's also a myth that goes hand in hand with that is that my job is the parent at home, and then your job is to do whatever at school.
Yeah.
We know. It might be a subconscious thought. So sometimes parents aren't aware of how they're behaving and expecting, and it's not to, uh, absolutely not disrespecting the system and the teachers and the educators. We love them, we need them, we support them. But also it's your child. And as you said, you know your child. So involvement is key in their education. It's not just a drop off, pick up, and forget that what happened during that day, that time of day. So I
So I think
mhm,
that that's interesting, right? I yes, and
mhm,
right.
mhm,
I think as educators, sometimes we overwhelm parents, right? To say that your child is underperforming, you need to do this, 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 and this. And the parent is like, how am I going to do that? I am a single parent and I work two jobs,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And this is just my experience of when I was a child. If my teacher went to my mom, how would she do all of that?
mhm,
I tell my teachers all the time, we want to get very, very clear and concrete on the one or two things we need parents to do. Because yes, they need to do their part at home, but they are not the teacher. And
right,
quite frankly, with the new math, I don't want you teaching your kid math.
yeah,
Like, because then I got to unteach and reteach once they get back here.
right,
Instead, in a lower elementary world, right, I want you to work on comprehension. So when y'all are watching a movie or watching another episode of SpongeBob, I want you to use this resource and start asking, well, why do you think SpongeBob was upset? Or why do you think Patrick went here after that? Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Something that's a low lift that's driving us towards the same goal, but it's not overwhelming to the parents. Or to
right,
say, Mom, I know that you do bath time every night. Here are flashcards. I'm gonna give you new flashcards every week so that way we can practice the sight words with the parent, with the kid, right?
mhm,
I think about even, and I think we cannot assume because every parent wants the best for their child, but not all parents have the tools to do so.
right,
And I think about when I first started teaching, I was telling this grandmother all the time, I'm like, you need to read with her. You need to read with her. You're not reading with her. Why are you not reading with her? All you got to do is read with her. And eventually, grandma was like, honestly,
can't
I
read.
can't read.
Mhm,
And I was like, whoa,
mhm,
okay. This is why this is so much more important. And
mhm,
then years later, we figured out a way with the advance of technology. I worked with my special education teachers where they'll voice record themselves reading and put it on a QR code. That way, kids get the chance to listen to it and practice their comprehension, and then they can also practice reading it. So, yes, the parent is not the teacher, but they have to do their part. And so do we. We have to do better as educators as well.
right. A collaborative effort. I've never heard of that method. I haven't worked with younger kids in a while, but I have seen certainly, 18-year-old eighth graders or 16-year-old seventh graders because of their delays in reading comprehension. But you have created this SPEDucated Leadership Framework. You talked about tools for parents, but you created this framework to equip school leaders with the tools. Can you share how your approach with charter schools addresses the challenges in providing support to the students?
Definitely. So, special education is a very lonely field. Often in schools, we are the folks that get the least amount of support and development
Hmm.
because oftentimes if you're the sped leader or the teacher, they're like, "Oh, you got this. Let us know if you need anything." But it's also like, "I'm struggling. Help." And they're like, "Well, I don't know how to help you." So
Hmm.
that's one thing. I think the other thing is, and this is not new to after the pandemic, but we know that there's a teacher shortage. And now there are people that are not always certified serving in these special education or small group instruction roles.
Hmm.
And so I know the reality of charter schools. I understand that at the end of the day, we have to get it done. And sometimes you just put someone in the position to just make sure that the kids are getting what they need. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But these people need help.
Right.
So when thinking about the framework, I'm thinking about the academic interventions, right? Like, how do you have a set of data, identify who are the highest need kids, and then create a 6-week intervention plan? How do you collaborate with the homeroom teacher in order to differentiate or just plan for the upcoming lesson to increase the access level of both students with disability, but also students that are multilingual learners, right? Because some
Mm-hmm.
of the practices are just best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Then we think about the behavioral part of the framework, which we have seen kind of blow up recently. There's a lot of kids since COVID because they're used to being at home by themselves or just their siblings and getting everything they want immediately when they want. So we have difficulties with self-regulation and coping and social personal skills. I think that's how you call it. But like talking to others, making
Mm-hmm.
friends, keeping friends, all those things. Um, we have kids that have disabilities that are manifesting or showing up greatly in the classroom. So thinking about the student with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or thinking about the student with ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, where teachers are like, they have this thing. I don't know what this thing is. I need help. They're not listening
Mm-hmm.
and they're not learning. So what do I do?
Right.
And then the third part of the framework is the leadership development. So working with SPED leaders, like often they're really, really good at compliance. They're really, really good at paperwork, but the people management component kind of falls by the wayside. They're like, I don't understand why they just won't do what they're supposed to do. And I'm like, yes, if it was that easy, many of us wouldn't have jobs.
Right.
So when I came up with the framework, it's identifying the top three, I guess, components of what it means to be a SPEDucated leader. And I deliver PDs on it. I do intensive coaching. So, like I have one client now where we're diving specifically into academics. And then I also have leadership coaching where I work with them week by week over the course of a year to just strengthen their special education departments and like what I like to call make something out of nothing.
Yeah. I'm a champion and a supporter and advocate for people like you, because I see what happens when schools don't have a you or, something, a glimmer of similarity to a you, right? Um, but some people, might think, well, my child is in special education, so why is this important for me? I hear you talk about multilingual learners, as well as those that are differently abled. But share with us why this is important for the whole and not just for the special education student and their family.
I love that question. No one ever asked that question. And I love it because it really allows me to emphasize the idea is good teaching, right? When we're doing the things that reach all the learners in the classroom, everyone is benefiting from it, right? If
Yeah.
I'm giving the feedback to the teacher to have an anchor chart, a visual, how many of us need that, right? I was not a student that received special education services, but now I have identified more and more strategies that help me, one, manage my time, organize my thinking. And these are different resources that we're explicitly teaching sometimes to students with disability. I think also, when thinking about a typical classroom of 30 students, sometimes kids need to learn how to advocate for what they need to be successful.
Mhm.
So it might be a student that might not have special education, but might be struggling in a certain math unit, and
Mhm.
they've received small group instruction and they're receiving resources to help kind of support their learning.
Yeah.
So it isn't about something that only benefits some students. It's about something that benefits all. And
Right.
I think what's interesting is that sometimes we forget that students in special education grow up to be adults. And if they do have not identified how to acknowledge how they feel and to respond in an appropriate way,
Mhm.
then it can blow up into a big, big, big thing, right?
Mhm.
So these are the skills that sometimes we have to explicitly teach students
Mhm.
that can benefit the masses either directly or indirectly.
Right. Right. And you've just shared how that improves and affects community and the larger scale of things. But what does this do for school systems as far as their outcomes and performance? What does that look like from that, administrator's perspective, the key measurements that a chief academic officer is looking for? How does this relate to that?
I think specifically something as simple as accommodations, right? What accommodations can you provide to someone so that way they can just demonstrate actually all that they know on paper?
Mhm.
And one of the things, like we have a lot of computer-based testing, almost everything has moved to computers now. And so some of the accommodations and accessibility features, such as the ability to make a text bigger so that you can see it versus squinting and being all close,
Right.
right? That's something that can then help someone actually get their ideas on paper to finish the test
Mm.
and have quality ideas. I
Yeah.
think about even the accommodation of such as extended time. So imagine you're taking a test, you know everything, but you just work a little slowly, and now you haven't finished the test in the time, and now everything is wrong, and you're marked an F,
Right.
right? That's not fair.
Right.
Just give them extra time so they can actually demonstrate what you know, and you might be surprised at how they score.
Right.
I think about even watching TV, right? I'm a person, I can't watch anything without subtitles at this point.
Same.
Nothing wrong with my ears. I just like to read it and hear it, right?
Mhm.
That's an
Mhm.
accommodation that just helps us give access to whatever it is that we're engaging in.
Mhm.
So it has direct impact on the outcomes of students.
Mhm.
And I think also on teachers and how they're feeling, because now you don't have a student that's feeling defeated in the middle of class because they don't know what's going on and they're
Mhm.
just tired. So they're just going to put their head down, right? How can we engage them and make learning fun? And school is not for everyone, right? But
Right.
there are some basic things that we have to learn, like counting money, telling time,
Mhm.
being able to navigate and tell directions, critical thinking, things like that. So, yeah.
Right, right. No, I love the work that you're doing, and I love that it is a comprehensive and a holistic approach to the classroom, the outcomes, the teachers, the parents, the students, administration. One of my friends from college has been in administration for a long time, and she's always had a heart for kids. And I actually have quite a few friends who are educators now that I think about it. But I see the hearts of these people, and I can say I'm sure there are some people who are like, "Oh, I didn't know that teaching would be what it's like." And then definitely after 2020, I didn't know that teaching would be what it's like. But here you are, and I'm going to I don't know if you self-identify as a change maker or not. The ooh. You know, your facial expression and someone I interviewed recently for Barter Black, she also was like, "Am I a change maker?" Like on air, we're just talking. She's like, "Me, a change maker? Huh? I guess I am a change maker. You are a change maker." And creating what you've created, having the courage. Number one, assessing the need. Number two, deciding that you are going to be the one to create this framework and this tool. And I haven't worked in K through 12, but I've worked alongside with K-12, and I know there's a lot of red tape. So you have stepped outside of that red tape and have created this process for moving the needle. I know that's a cliche, but I think it's applicable in this moment of moving the needle. And sometimes as change makers, we don't think of ourselves as change makers. We don't think of ourselves as pioneers. What was it like for you to go through this process of saying, I see a problem, I have a solution, I'm going to take time, right? People think, oh, overnight. No, things don't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes a process. What was that like for you?
That's an interesting question because I didn't decide to do this. Like I think it's funny because I think I just kind of happenstance into certain things in life. I
Mhm.
happenstance into education. I happenstance into special education. But I really think the experience of co-founding that charter school from scratch, right? There was no district to reach out to for support and help. We opened it right before the pandemic. We were closed our first year.
Mhm.
The second year, we were only open for like 6 weeks, maybe. But we had things that we had to do. We had problems we had to solve, and it was just me showing up every day to figure out what can we do to be of best service to students and their families, and then kind of just go from there. And so when thinking about my business looks just like my day to day. Like it's just the same. Like me talking in and checking in with teachers or leaders. Hey, what's going on? What's the problem?
Mhm.
Okay, heard you. What have you tried? Okay, have you thought about this? Okay, try it, and let's come back together to figure out what needs to fix and what is good to go.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so I like the pioneer. I mean, that sounds cool, but I think that's giving me a lot more credit than I deserve. Because I'm just here. I'm just here to be of service to my community. Um, Teaching was cool. Teaching took too much out of me. I think there are folks that are really, really good teachers, and sometimes they're put into leadership positions and they're not great leaders.
Mhm.
I was a good teacher. I'm a great leader. I can
Mhm.
say that.
Mhm.
And I think that's why, like, this doesn't, they often say, like, once you're working in your passion, it doesn't feel like work.
Mhm.
That's how I feel. Like, it doesn't feel like work. Now, there's aggravating people and aggravating days, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong.
Uh-huh.
But generally, like, and it's interesting because I also work full time. And people often ask, like, when are you gonna, stop working full time and just do your business? And I'm like, I have no desire to do, like, I love what I do.
Right.
So there's no reason for me to, until I always say, I joke, until people start getting on my nerves, then I'll quit. But no, everything's good. So I'm just
Right.
riding the ride.
Right. Right. No, I appreciate your humility, and I think that that is one of the reasons why I do what I do in working alongside change makers and pioneers, because it isn't about you. It isn't about the extra stuff. It is exactly what you just said. It doesn't feel like work when you love it and when you're purpose to do it. And so I think that, having an opportunity to share your story, to share your, why you're doing it, and oh, I saw a problem. I have a solution. Let's get it done. Everybody isn't like that. We know. Some people just be like, oh, that's not my problem, or they're just, well, that's their problem. That's not affecting us. So therefore, we don't have a foot in this fight. But in our earlier process of this, you shared that you would be interested in talking about imposter syndrome, and balancing administrative duties with student-centered goals. And so I think that what I am seeing with change makers like you, who don't self-identify as a pioneer or a change maker, that is something that just comes innately to you. And it's like, oh, I'm a change maker. Oh, okay. And then your head is down and then you're doing the work. Right. But sometimes there are moments and it's like, am I doing this? Okay, I'm doing this and I'm going forward. So I just want to, applaud you for that and say again, you are the first. I think I don't know when this episode will air just yet, but out of 32 episodes so far of recording, you are the first person in the education space that we've had a chance to speak with. And I count it a joy. Some of my work has been with the Center for Education Policy Research with Harvard University, and how we can encourage policy change, because without policy change, there is no system change. And without people knowing who you are and knowing the problems that you're addressing, there isn't enough noise to be created to, influence that change. So I applaud you. What can we expect next from you, and your work?
Yes, so I'm super excited. As of October 1st, I will be launching our new SPEDucated Leader PD Vault. And this is going to be like a PD library of comprehensive trainings and sessions that are related to our framework of academics, behavior, and leadership development. And the goal is for teachers to be able to leverage this platform in order to just help upskill them so that they feel more confident leading instruction or
Mhm.
responding behaviorally to students.
Mhm.
And so I'm super excited about that. And there's two different tiers, and one tier also allows for us to have a monthly coaching calls where we can come together and you bring your problem and we collaboratively problem solve, and we just have community, right? We talk about how hard this work is and how this is our last year, but we talk about a solution and how we can't wait for next year because it's going to be so much better.
Right.
And so I'm really, really excited about this just online course because I think it will be an opportunity for folks to learn as they go,
Mhm.
to process. We have homework embedded in it, of course, the educator and me. So that's really allowing them to reflect on the things that they're learning and then put it into practice.
Mhm.
So super, super excited about that.
Oh, I love that. It'll allow access for so many more people who can't make it up to visit you in the Northeast. Are you available for trainings, consulting, speaking?
Yes, I travel everywhere. I have a client down in Louisiana, Milwaukee, Maryland. So wherever the need is, I'll definitely go.
Mhm.
We do virtual trainings, asynchronous trainings, where it's half virtual and half in person.
Mhm.
Literally, I'm here to serve. As long as my schedule permits, we can figure something out and just go from there. And so I'll definitely provide all of my handles and websites so that folks can learn more about it.
Mhm.
And even parents, if you're just having questions about like something is not right on, they're saying that, there's a big discussion around, silent suspensions or kids being sent home early for
Mhm.
behavior, which is illegal. Let me just say that. But if you just need a thought partner, if you just need someone that understands, I'm your girl.
I love that. I could talk even longer with you about being a parent advocate or a family advocate. I've seen things that I'm so glad you're here to eliminate and mitigate. But if there's one thing that you'd like to leave the audience with today, what would that be?
So much pressure. Um, I think extend grace. Extend grace to children that are still trying to figure out their bodies and what's going on inside. Extend grace to teachers that are trying their best but don't know what else to do.
Mm,
Extend grace to leaders who are trying to support their teachers but also don't know what to do and they're tired and burnt out. And support parents and extend grace to parents because they're also at home struggling
yeah.
and they're scared sometimes to just be honest because they don't want to get in trouble, whatever that might look like. So I think extend grace is that's it.
That's an incredible message. Diana, tell us how we can connect with you online.
Definitely. So you can follow me on Instagram at the SPEDucated Leader. That's SPEDucated Leader. And then you can also follow me on Facebook as well or on LinkedIn. Diana Williams is my name. And then for the website, just to see an overview of the online course, the SPEDucated PD Vault, or just some of our one-day PDs that we do on trauma-informed care, it's DianaRWilliamsLLC.com. I'm working on shortening that, but when I first started it, I didn't have a lot of creative juices flowing. So Diana R. Williams, LLC.com. And Diana is spelled like the princess, one N.
You know, one more thing because I'm just remembering, and you just mentioned it. I don't know how I forgot this, but the trauma informed care piece. Can we go back a little bit real quick to talk
Mhm.
about trauma informed care, ACEs? What is trauma informed care? What does it mean? Why do we need to know about it?
Ooh, trauma informed care is life, right? It is the internal and external factors that either directly or indirectly just play into how we're going through life. And that's one of my favorite PDs to do because I used a case study. I first delivered it at a school in the Bronx. So I wrote a case study on Cardi B. Don't sue me, it's a fake story. But we just follow Cardi through her life and like how, even in the morning, how one small thing, maybe she lives in a housing projects, or maybe her parents just recently got divorced, or maybe she lives in an environment with smog in the air, with a lot of smog because it's factories or things like that. These are things that start to indirectly affect kids in the school. I even think about students sometimes when they're eating and putting things in their mouth and chewing and swallowing it. That's also an indication that they had lead poisoning. And so folks need to go to their apartment and check the paint.
Mm,
So those are some environmental factors. We think about, and we've just passed September 11th, but let's say you're reading a text and the date comes up September 11th and someone lost a family member. Now their whole day is impacted because of that. So it's teaching educators and just people to understand that There's the invisible and the visible things that we're carrying around with us. So again, we have to extend grace and understand that it might be more than what we just see. They might not just have an attitude because they have an attitude, but 5 or 6 things might have happened before they got to school. So how do we move in grace, right? We're not lessening the bar or lessening the expectations. We're just, handling them with care.
Right.
Acknowledging that it's the both. Yes, life has happened and now you're here. So how can I positively impact you and affect you to turn your day around to make sure that you're getting the learning that you're right.
Right. So a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old who is acting out simply doesn't have the words to express their discomfort or their fear or their anxiety, right? Or the 12-year-old who witnessed her mother's boyfriend speak to her in a certain way or put hands on her is not sassy and having an attitude. She's afraid and doesn't know how to ask for help.
Which doesn't mean we excuse the behavior, right? We just understand and teach them a different way.
Right. So I think every educator, anyone who interacts with children and adults who've experienced trauma should receive trauma-informed training. So please do connect with Diana. You don't have to be an educator to do your trauma-informed care training. Is that correct?
No, whatever setting, I will tailor the program to you.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you again, Diana. This has been incredible. I look forward to seeing the work that you continue to do, and I hope that many will reach out and at least ask questions, right?
Yeah, that's the start.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Changemaker, real quick before you go, if today's episode helped you in some way, the best way to thank me is to head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the channel, and leave a review. I'd also love to connect with you over on social. You can find me at Friends Call Me Fee. Until next time, keep changing the game.